Hi everyone, this is Swapna from Kring team. Welcome you all to this evening session on how to introduce birding or bird watching to your children. Keep your microphones in mute, and the question answer sessions will be taken in the end. Some of you have posted the questions in the bird watching group. So we have noted it down and the speakers will address most of the questions. If you miss out on any questions, then we can always address it at the end of the webinar. We will try to keep it to time. No posting, keep your microphones in mute so that the speakers are not disturbed. All right. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Can you hear me? Just a thumbs up. Yes. Okay. Good. All right. I'm Swapna Narayan, and on behalf of the entire Kring team, I would like to welcome all of you to this evening session on how to introduce bird watching to your kids. Now, we have two fabulous speakers with us. And before we introduce the speakers, I would like to say something a little bit about what Kring is all about. Okay, great. Now the screen is for your viewing. Kring is an abbreviation for creative thinking. And it is a brainchild of a couple of wonderful mothers and fathers who have successfully done their parenting journey, and they want to share this extensively researched and well-implemented parenting technique with a lot of parents. So right now, our parenting community is 700 plus parents, and they are our strength and a support system. I'll tell you more about the parenting methodology of Kring a little later. But right now, our speakers are ready to start the session. Our two speakers are Amal Fatima Abdullah and Fauzia. Our first speaker is going to be Amal Fatima Abdullah. Let me give her introduction. Amal Fatima is currently pursuing her MSc in Wild Sciences from Aligarh Muslim University. She did her bachelor's in zoology from Delhi University. She has interned with Wildlife Trust of India and Bombay Natural History Society. She enjoys being surrounded by nature and witnessing life around her. Her main interests in wildlife are understanding animal behavior and helping to mitigate human-wildlife conflict. Apart from this, she is also a bibliophile and knows how to find her way around the kitchen. Welcome, Amal Fatima, and I'm handing over the platform to you.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Just give me a second. I just want to share my screen.
Hello. Hello.
Yes. Who is this?
This is Milind here.
Okay.
There are a few people joining the Google Meet actually. Shall I tell them to join Zoom?
Yes, please.
All right.
You have the link? Yeah. All right.
I got the link from WhatsApp actually. WhatsApp message, right?
Yes. Please join. The session is about to start. It's already started, by the way. Yeah. Okay, Amal Fatima.
1 second. I'm so sorry. There is my laptop is something happened.
So no idea if they have appropriate link actually to join them. I will set ID, individual ID, or it's a common link for everybody.
It's a common link. Milind, do you have my WhatsApp number? You can text me.
I have the group number, right?
You have the group number, no? Please text there and okay. There's a link. Just a minute. Shruti, can you share the link on the chat?
I have the link actually. I mean,
Can you share it with your friends?
It is already shared in the group, right? So,
Yes, yes, it is. It is.
so they should have that link.
Okay, okay. Can we start the session then?
Yes.
Let's start.
Yeah. All right. Please, Fatima. Yeah.
You guys can hear me, right? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I would like to talk about, I was introduced earlier, I'm a student of wildlife science, and I'm a person who enjoys bird watching a lot. I mean, I enjoy studying animal behavior and mammals also, but I think it's easier for all of us also to enjoy bird watching more, because first of all, birds are seen everywhere. I mean, it's more difficult to find mammals around you, and maybe reptiles also, because you need to understand their reptilian behavior and go out in the night or like that. So at that, this is bird watching is more simpler. I think when we're trying to connect with any organism in nature, I think bird watching is the most simplest and the best way to connect for kids. So I'm just gonna start with the benefits of having kids in nature. First, I would like to say that I'm not a parent, and so I'm just gonna talk about the details which I believe the kids might find interesting. I hope the other panel members can work more on that. So I'm just gonna start. So over here, it's benefits of interacting with nature. So first of all, it's like nature is a complete open-ended. It's a wide world. Like your kids are totally free. They can, have fun. They can scream. They can run around, and it's a constant journey where you keep on discovering stuff. I think they're very curious. They all are by innate scientists. They keep on asking you questions on why is it flying, or what is this rock like this, or why is this plant like this. So it's they continuously discover when they are in nature, and even a lot of experiences. Like they keep on analyzing stuff. Suppose if they're walking or going behind some bird, or they'll know, it's a trial and error method continuously for them, that they'll know that the bird is not approachable, or this bird or this animal you can pet, or in a cat, if you go slowly, you'll be able to approach the cat. And it's like a continuous environment where you can continuously learn and you know uh, grow, I believe, and develop all your skills. And it's a continuous stimulating environment, like bird songs, or it's like if you want to, like, if your audio stimulus, you hear songs, you start listening to the rain, or even maybe the gentle breeze in the forest, or the sound of just walking through the forest, and you hear the leaves just breaking under your footfalls. And even vision, it's like once you start training yourself to be more in nature, or seeing more in nature, it's like you start observing more. Like even I started, I mean, I was always interested in wildlife, but I started birding quite late, and I used to never see the birds around me. It's until I started have a partner with me who started showing me like these birds are there. This is where you can see them. So after that, I have been always walking with my eyes on the tree instead of the road. Sometimes it's dangerous, but still. And you keep on finding new creatures. You keep on your vision, everything gets oriented to that world once you have interest in them. Like you keep on, like whenever you go outside, even sometimes when I go in towns, my eyes will be in the top, like searching for raptors or birds, or maybe sparrows. And all this stuff can also be seen where they're like busy urban areas also. So it's like maybe when you're home, the kids are restricted, like they can break stuff, they can't talk, I mean scream. And also it's like when you're outside, you can do all that, and it's a very freeing, a very peaceful place. And also it's like, yes, overall child fitness, this I can say, I mean, I can say based on like scientific knowledge, like vitamin D or exposure with mud and sand at a young age can actually increase your immunity. And once kids, get start to observe all this, their patience also increase a lot. Like, because once you're observing a bird, once the bird goes away, again seeing where the bird goes or waiting for the bird to come back, all this time takes a lot of patience and effort. So once you're like actually into nature, it's really nice. Like they keep on observing it. And also uh, just remember, like whatever the kids do, it's also good for the parents. Like when they're outside and having a good breeze or having a healthy environment, even the parents or us adults also can just join them and be connected with nature. It's always a soulful experience. You even just like sometimes I can sit and talk to the trees. Maybe even if your kids can be friends with trees and like associating these stuff with nature, like associating that nature is a friend, can also in the long run help the planet also. Like from a young age, when we start associating that nature is important to us, or these trees provide a lot of stuff to us. Without the trees, we won't be able to survive. Or the tree is a home to so many birds or squirrels or things you play, I mean, animals you see around, or your pets. So once you start associating all these things, it actually helps in the long run, because we are the youth. I mean, youth is the future. I mean, actually, a lot of people who are also fighting for nature currently in all these Fridays for Future organizations and all, they all are actually kids, teenagers, and also once they're actually passionate about it, it helps in long run. Because currently with all the carbon emissions and sustainable development and all the huge development going on, once the kids are able to associate and understand the need for nature and bond with nature, it helps the environment and the earth in a long run. Now, I would like to talk about how to get kids connected to nature. So, I would like to say, like in my experience, I was brought up abroad. I was brought up in Saudi Arabia, and obviously, I was like mostly in a flat. But I had a lot of books with me. I was surrounded by books always, and I actually started connecting with animals and wildlife through books. I used to see these lot of. I used to have a lot of books, and that was a huge benefit. And the biggest, I think, the way author I connected with was Enid Blyton. So I have just mentioned one book here, that is Autumn Rights. And in that, maybe it was not all about animals, it was about children and how they interact with pets and how they take there was this horse, and when the horse gets sick, they take the horse to the veterinary. And the connection the horse have with kids, or maybe if it's a dog also or a cat, how they bond with it, how they play with it. So all these things actually was what made me interested before I could actually be around these animals. So it was like and this is like, and applied to like there is a lot more, it's age oriented. If I think for like lesser ages, there are also a lot of books online. I was just like going through and a lot of like picture books, moral books, and even books which give a brief about what kind of like their behavior. Like we call our sleeps a lot, or what does the butterfly do. So basically teaching bit of their behavior, and plus a lot of beautiful books. So some of these are like the ladybird animal stories and water world. Over here, what I want to say is you have to understand what your kids interest is. Sometimes they're more interested in aquatic or like water animals. Sometimes they're interested in birds. Sometimes they're interested in mammals like elephants or dolphins. So I believe all the books they're interested, it's available online, like depending on it. So once you understand your kids' interest and once you start building upon it, you can, I think, basically increase your horizon and be able to make them read more. That is one way. And a lot of picture books and even audio books are there where you can just, they can listen to the vocabulary, everything in detail. We all know like everything has a lot of benefits, and this is one like can help a lot into connecting into nature. And then other one is artwork. That is also depending on interest of your kid. Like if they like to paint or draw or what their interest is. Then we can like do like even simple mandala art, like collect flowers, arrange them, or we all had to do that in our school days. Like we had to cut the ladies' finger, dip them in paint, and make vegetable art. And or I still have the habit of collecting feathers, like fallen feathers, and also not from sanctuaries, like where it is allowed. So just like collecting feathers, so you like keep on associating with this feather is this birds, or like this is how a feather looks. So maybe painting feathers or collecting feathers. All this thing can slowly us connect whatever we do with the nature or the importance of it. And also we can talk about reusing, because overall sustainability and all. So we can talk about reusing or refusing plastic bottles, or reusing glass containers, or like making igloos with eggshells and all those worms. I mean, there's a lot of YouTube videos also where they show how to make best out of waste videos, like making pencil holders out of plastic bottles. So when you do this, you can also teach them like to reuse your waste and to reduce it. And plastic, no matter what, is really harmful for the nature. So like these, even through artwork, we can teach them all these necessities which are needed for our environment. And then this is like playing games. This is like for people who are also having like going to parks, connecting with grass, or just associating small things like walking on wet grass, or watching rain, or if possible playing in rain, and hanging and swinging from trees. And all these games which make us interested, like when we are happy, we keep on going back to do that thing. So once your kids associate happiness with nature, it would be really good. My screen is not visible. Hello, I got a message. It's visible, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Then there is a site, Bird Academy. I'll be talking more about it later. So this is a site by Cornell Lab. And over here, they have a thing known as Play Lab. So you just have to go to the site. I'll be showing the site a little bit later. So over here, they have a lot of games like Flap to the Future, Bird Song Hero. And even I was actually trying to, like, when I was doing this presentation, I was trying to play those games. Even I found them like a bit difficult, but they also have tutorial videos on how to learn. And it's also for all age groups. It's said from like 3 to 6 or 6 to 13. So based on your child's interest, or when you're playing these games, you'll understand, okay, like this bird is this. Okay, when you learn the bird songs, so when you hear the bird songs outside, like, yes, I had played in this game, I remember this bird song. And all about fancy male. So over here also it like shows up pictures about like the peacock. The peacock is a very fancy male. It has huge feathers. There are also like birds of paradise, a lot of birds which have elaborate displays. And I think these basic stuff will interest the kids a lot. So when you show them like videos of birds dancing, or birds singing, or birds making nest, and all this would like make them really connected to birds and nature. So over here in this Bird Academy Play Lab, it's a site and it has all these games. And yeah, this is just like knowledge makes it easier. It's like, I would like to say, start with common birds, or common everything, not only birds, even if it's nature, like common birds, maybe basic stuff like it's a parrot, it's a crow, or it's a warbler. It's like, or simpler birds which you might already have an idea, or in local names, whatever it is. So it's like teach them, okay, this is a crow. And then once they start associating crow, so it's like once they're able to identify some birds, they will like make it happy. So they will continue to identify more birds. And what I do, I mean, I have a younger sister around here. So I'll be like, okay, this is a warbler. And they're also known as seven sisters. And they're always seen in groups. So you can see them always in groups. And they're like hopping around. So it's like maybe providing additional information about like the behavior. So it's like So they associate a lot of stuff. Okay, this is the bird group which makes so much noise and it's always in groups. And then they don't sometimes remember the name. They come and say, this is Seven Sisters have come here. So it's like once you give additional information and all, it helps them interest. Like this is okay, maybe this is a crow. The crow is completely black. So, or it makes this sound. Or if it's a warbler, it's a tiny bird. It's brown colored, and maybe if you know behavioral significance of what they eat, or if you see them eating insects, tell them they eat this little insects. Or have you seen them eat our bananas? So all this, associating all this knowledge or in adding information can help them a lot. I mean, if you have a good, if you just some basic information would actually, then I think kids are really curious. They can actually build upon it and maybe get to know more about it. Maybe you can also make their interest increase by asking them questions. Like, why does the parrot have a bent beak? Or why does the kingfisher have a pointed beak? Or why is the, maybe if we have domesticated birds also, there are a lot of really nice, I have a lot of hens, and my mom is also really crazy about birds. So we have a lot of birds. So like we see the birds, just spreading their wings, and sometimes, mud bathing also. They spray the mud. So basically it is to prevent like parasites and germs and all that. So like this behaviors, when you see them, even you can also observe, you can also show it to the kids, so they'll be really interested. Wow, the bird is also doing this. Or you see the bird is always cleaning it, always making sure the feathers are clean, and they have oil glands. So I believe when you give them a lot more information like this, it will help them, associating with the bird or making it interesting. Now, this is some morphological features for identification of bird. I think this can be in a more bigger, higher levels, maybe if you're starting beginners. Also, like we can start with associating with color, like it's a green bird or it's a black bird. So then we can, like the beak shape is hooked or the beak shape is pointed. Then I think the bird songs and all come a bit more later, because even for me, it's like still difficult to, depends, some might have better auditory skills to identify the bird song. So once you start listening to it, you will be like, okay, this bird is this. And songs are really beautiful. And then flight patterns and all, I think it's a bit more advanced. Like we can see raptors. Raptors are the predators. No, I haven't explained at that point. I'll explain. So it's like raptors and all are big birds. Like, so when we see hawks or black kites, they're generally on the top of the sky. So when we see their flight, they're generally a soaring flight. They keep their wings open and fly. So we know that these are raptors. So it's like slowly we'll be able to, it's a step-by-step process. Even I had to go through a lot of steps, like, okay, this color, maybe this bird has these two combination of colors, and this it's seen in maybe in habitats.
हमारे पैरेट का कौन सा कलर है?
Is someone saying me something? Okay. So this is just, I would like to go through this. This is knowing basic morphology can help when you're trying to convey to someone else also. Like suppose maybe when we have a basic idea of the birds, when some people just say like it's a green bird with orange beak, or so we associate, okay, these birds can have like we know that these many specific birds in this around this area have this. So it's like, suppose when you're describing a bird to someone, we can say like, okay, this part is the nape of the bird, or this is the beak of the bird, and these feathers, they have like primary, secondary. So learn more deep in morphology and all, I can send you PDFs also, like if you're interested in morphology of birds or basic anatomy. And this is, we just say like the breast part of it is white. Like I'll show you some birds, so maybe you'll understand later what I meant. So like the breast part may be white or different colored, the primaries, the secondaries, and these are different types of bird morphology. So over here, this can help, maybe, because sometimes when we're starting from basics, it's like maybe I'm just taking an example of a bird that is a drongo. So after some time, we learned like a dronco is a blackbird, but when we go to a lot of its different like similar species, there will be like the dronco, one dronco, like the greater tailed dronco has long tail, or the blank dronco over its eye patch, it is more mate colored, different colored, or there is a lot of oriental white eye birds. So it's like the eye of the bird is generally white. So when we know the basic morphology features of the bird, it helps a lot. Even when you want to convey to someone, or when you're like noting it, or when you're learning it also, you'll be like, okay, this flame, like the woodpecker has a black thing on its nape. So it actually helps us even learning more about birds, or also conveying it to others. So that is like the basics over here. Even claw shape and all, I think that is also like a bit more maybe advanced, I don't know. It's suppose when you have webbed feet, so you know that it is for aquatic because they need it for swimming. And when it is two in the front, two in the back, it is for perching, like because you have to perch on the beak. Or when it is really sharp and really long, then you know they're predators because they have to catch like the black-eyed eagles, you know, they have to catch their prey, so it's really long. So it's a lot of other features which we slowly learn and look forward to. Once we know these morphological, actually once we have an idea, we connect a lot of with a lot of the birds, so we can understand its overall behavior much more easier. Now this is bird songs. We might know the basics, like we know what a hen makes, or we know what a crow makes. We also know the robin's voice is really sweet, like tweet tweet. I mean, I'm still really not very good with it. And this is like, you can put it into words, especially for kids. So when you say like the red whiskered bulbul says pleased to meet you. So at that time, every time we hear it song, we'll be like, okay, it's saying pleased to meet you. And we actually can't hear anything else once you put it into words. So it will be easier for the kids to learn once you make them sentences for it, or once you, and also they have to also make sure it's like heard repeatedly. I have put a slide, this image over here. This is a part of Merlin app. I'll be also talking about Merlin app later. So in this Merlin app, whatever species you put in, like I have added a lesser whistling duck over here, and then there is ID information that you get the image and put a lot of information about it, and there is sound. So you have like a lot of calls and a lot of songs. The birds have like calls and songs. Calls are like normal, what they use for daily communication in simple terms, like when they are like alarm calls, when they're frightened, or when they're passing normal information. And songs are basically used during mating period, like the male, in most cases the male sing, in some birds female also sing. So the bird songs, they tell, okay, I'm ready to mate, or I'm a good singer, I'm a really good partner because I can sing really well. So bird songs are much more longer and more nice to hear, for me. So this is like Merlin app is an app which you can have in the phone. So once you hear the bird, so it's like I keep on like hearing at least for 2-3 days more, like the same sound, going back to the same sound, or once I have a confusion, because in nature there are a lot of birds which mimic other birds also. The greatest is the racket-tailed drongo around here. It mimics a lot of birds. So sometimes you get confused if it's mimicry or not mimicry. So over here, once you actually understand the quality of the call, or how it sings properly, like there's a woodpecker, I generally say it has a drumming call. It is like a mortar drilling, continuously drills. So it's a very loud noise. So, but it's also nice you keep on going back to this app, or in all the like eBird sites and all the songs and sounds are available. So you keep on, and you should also know that a bird has a lot of sounds, a lot of vocals. It's just not like one song. They have a lot of, like, just like us, we have a lot of words, and also they have a lot of other songs and vocals they use for different purposes. So it's nice to have a 2 or 3 vocals in our mind. So we'll be able to identify them. Like when we hear it, we'll be like, okay, this is this bird. And you'll get better with it. Sometimes it might seem difficult in the starting. But then, you keep on like, okay, now you understand, like the greater cockle has a very thick voice. and the racket tail has a metallic voice. So keep on slowly, you will itself will differentiate when you keep on repeating and hearing it again and again. You understand, okay, these are the bird songs, and it makes birding much more easier. Actually, once you start becoming a professional birder, learning the bird songs or the learning bird noises is like very, very important, especially like in Western Ghats, when you're going to the forest. Like when I started birding and all, I used to like just go behind, and what I used to see, I could maybe understand, because this is an oriole. But then we used to have a lot of people who used to accompany us, and they used to just close their eyes and okay, this bird is here. Okay, this bird is here. So there are 4 or 5 birds of this. So especially in dense forest, it's not always easy to see them, and even a lot of birds are small or camouflage. So when you hear their sound, it's a very important method of identifying or telling that the bird species is found in this area. Now, this is just a small morphological this based on beaks, and we know all the birds, everyone in nature is adapted to its specific needs. All animals on like they are in the most evolutionary area where they can, like, all the adaptations they have is like the best for them. So I'm just going to focus over here on feeding adaptations. So over here, the first one is a house crow, and it is written as generalist. Generalist means it can feed a wide array of food. Like generalist, it can feed on, like they eat insects, they eat meat also, they're omnivorous also. They have berries, they eat grains. So they feed on a large amount of diet. That is generalist. And the opposite is specialist, which have a specialized form of diet. So over here we can see the insect catching has a small and piercing sharp this, because they have to either poke the insect and catch it and eat it. Just need a small beak to catch the insects. And grain eating has a rounded, also small beak, because they only need a small beak to eat the grains and rice and wheat and all. Over here we can see it is coniferous seed eating. This is a very specific bird. It's like there is cones, and because it has a tip, like it's crossed, it helps to crack open the cones. It's, I think, more seen like in the pine tree has those cones. That is the cones which it helps them. And then this is nectar feeding. Obviously we know it's seen in like hummingbirds, and in it's seen in sunbirds. They are generally very small birds, first of all, and their beaks are very tiny, because the flowers also, they have to put their beaks, the beaks inside the flowers, and they have the sucking type of mechanism, so they suck in the nectar. And over here we saw chiseling. Chiseling is basically, this is seen in woodpeckers and also other birds which feed on the tree sap. So chiseling is like sowing. They keep on making holes in the tree. We see these woodpeckers and all, I think around in Kerala, I have more observed them in coconut trees, or the arcate nut, I think it's arca nut. Yeah, those beetle nut trees. Yeah, so they keep on like drilling these, and they will be insects, or they're taking tree sap. So that is what chiseling. So they have really pointed and really sharp, really strong muscles. So they even, when we like learn in depth, you also know like their muscles and the whole jaw structure is modified to have that strong thing for them to eat insects and chisel into the wood. Fruit eating. This is actually in South African, I believe, birds. They have long beaks to also help them open fruits, nuts, and also eat more. And this is dip netting. It's seen in pelicans and all. So over here in pelicans, they just sit on the walls, like they are seen in water birds. So they, when suppose a lot of fish or fish schools or like surface fishes are going, they just dip in and they fill their pouches with both water and fish. And then they can actually filter out the water and they just take in the fish. So this is what dip netting is. Surface skimmers, these are birds. I don't know if I should go in this detail. Like sandy beaches and all. It's seen like flowers. So they see the surface for earthworms and other worms or oysters. So that is why they are known as like surface skimmers. There's also probing. It's also like they probe into holes. That's why they have a long thing, so that they probe into holes and have insects. And this aerial fishing, they have also pointed beaks. That is because they have to catch the fish. Like this kingfishers and all, they directly like skim down and catch the fish. Even some of these fish beaters, they have really more pointed ones because they just pierce through the fish, and the fish just gets stuck there. And this is like scavenging. It's seen in it's seen in vultures, and they are the main scavengers we know in birds. So they have like really sharp hooked ones, so then they can easily tear off the meat, and also take the meat of the bones and all that. I'll explain filter feeding also. Filter feeding is actually a very interesting thing. Once you learn it in depth and all, it's seen in flamingos. Flamingos actually they fish with their heads upside down, and then their beaks have like filter kind of surface. So just take in water and filter out, and just like take in water and filter in the like the food they need. That is like filter feeding. And pursuit fishing, so like this going behind the fish, like water birds going behind the fish, diving, and there's a lot of things. Like this is like few parts. So all the birds are adapted to the kind of nature or kind of area they live in. So it's, once we start learning the behavior, it's really interesting, and how all the complete body is modified. Even like flight adaptations also, if you just look like how the whole body of the like the bird is adapted to fly at such heights or have such wing power. So this is just, I thought, this was a last minute plan, so I haven't been able to add in a lot of birds. These are just some birds which are seen and commonly seen in Kerala. After the session, I'll send a PDF in the group anyways. It's the Atlas of Birds in Kerala. So all the birds which you can generally see in Kerala is seen. I'll also send a field guide on Indian subcontinent. So what you can see commonly in India is also there. They're like two really good guides. I have a PDF of it. I'll be putting them in the group. So these are just like some common birds which suddenly like came into my mind, and I just like put. So this is a lesser whistling duck. So over here we can see like it has webbed feet because it's generally seen in the water, and so we can say it has like a golden orange color when we're describing it. And it's actually, and water is generally seen in groups, and almost like 12 to 16 groups, or maybe large. Like I have seen it also in wetlands also currently in when it rains and all, when the water rises in wetlands or paddy fields and all, sometimes we can see them when there's a pond or a water area. Maybe in S2 or 3 also we can see these lesser whistling ducks, and it's really nice to like see them. They also really fly quite well also. This is northern pintail. Like a lot of name also comes from its features. So over here we can see it has a pin tail, which is why its name is northern pintail. Then this is an oriental darter. Over here we can see like the bird is trying to air his feathers. So it's like the birds generally are waterproof. So it's like once they have water, because they have oil glands, and because of the structure of the feathers also. So sometimes like aquatic birds, it's like not a compromise, what to say. It's like they are really good aquatic birds. A lot of their body is adapted to swimming and diving and fishing that way. So sometimes because if the feathers is that waterproof, then they won't be able to dive much because it will like pushing it away. So because of that, in oriental darter, it's not that waterproof. So before flight, it is seen like they kind of rest there for I don't know the correct amount of time until it gets dried. So they generally, you can see them in banks or in between the rivers and rocks or something. They'll be like drying it off before they can fly. And this is cormorant. This is kind of an aquatic area. So this is Indian cormorant. There are like different kinds of cormorant. These are also generally seen in lakes, rivers, aquatic systems. Over here, we can see it has a really nice blue eye. Sometimes it'll be like small features which, which we have to like identify, because there are different type of cormorants also. So basically, like, okay, this is a cormorant. It's dark in color. It's black color. It's generally found near water bodies, and they're also really good swimmers. The next one is, this is a white-throated kingfisher. I think it's quite seen very common around in Kerala, or like when you have like lakes or river bodies and all nearby. So over here, see, like the name is white-throated kingfisher. So we can say like that is how, like, a lot of names are also connected with their morphological or the details of the body. So this is like easy to name because we know in this kingfisher it is white-throated over here, and the rest of it is a kingfisher color. So we know it's a white-throated kingfisher. Also, see, its beak is really pointed because it is a fishing bird. It's an aerial fisher. It like just dives into the fish, into the pond, takes the fish and go. Over here also, this is a common kingfisher. It is a more tiny, it's a smaller bird, but like they're so beautiful. So we'll be like, it also has, we can say the nares have an orangish color, or the chest part of it is orange color. It's other feathers. But when you're checking feathers also, there are like a lot of details, like the outermost is primary, the inner is secondary. So it's nice if you have morphological details. If you don't have also, just for the, it's still beautiful to just watch these birds swim or fly, or it's a happiness, that with all this human population growth and climate change, I kind of feel happy whenever I see these. I'm like, okay, at least the nature is doing its job. The nature is surviving. So this is the first three birds are the ones we see more common in Western. I mean, we only see them in Western Ghats. This is Malabar grey hornbill. It's gray in color. So it's like a lot of things will be there in the name sometimes. And we know hornbills have really big beaks. So all hornbills have really big beaks, but like Indian hornbills are more colorful, and they have like yellow color also. And some hornbills have a different structure on the top of their beak, but Malabar grey hornbill does not have it. And they're also fruit eating. They eat a lot on fruit. That is why the beaks are really wide. And this is Malabar Trogon. I've only like been able to see this once, and it's really beautiful. And it's also like endemic. Endemic means it's only found in Western Ghats. So over here, and this is Nilgiri flycatcher. I don't know, like they're so cute, like the blue and completely bluish birds, just darker colors towards their tips. And this is like, sometimes I just put these pictures to show, like they may look really similar. You can just start birding by saying, okay, this is a bulbul. But the small birds with black head and brown bodies are bulbul. And when we go on details, we see like it has a red vent, a red color. So then we know this is a red vented bulbul. And then over here, we see its whiskers. Over here, it is red color. So it is red whiskered bulbul. So it's like when you keep on getting better, there are like a lot of species which I think it's level by level, because even like for me also till recent years, all crows were like crows, until I came to know that there are like jungle crows and there are house crows. So it's like slowly we build up on the detail, but we start slow, like with the colors or with small things which are relatable to everyone, understandable to everyone. This is a jungle warbler. This is the one which they are quite noisy, but I mean, I describe them as noisy. Many people won't, but they're generally seen. I mean, if you have a park or if you have a quite good backyard, they're generally in your backyard to eat bits of food or eat insects. So you generally see them hopping around, and and it is nice because they're in groups. So it's like 6 to 7, or I think 3 to 12 is the range when you're going into depth details. But then because it's seen in groups, it's commonly called as seven sisters. Now, this is racket-tailed drongo. So these blackbirds, I mean, there are a lot of drongos in Kerala itself. There is bronze drongo, black drongo. I took racket-tailed drongo because of its tail. It's really beautiful. Like there are two extensions over here, and so when it flies, the tail actually goes like this. It's really nice, and it's also a very good mimicry artist. And over here we have a greater flameback. This is the one which makes the drilling, the motor sound over here. And we see it's like standing vertically to the tree. So actually its claws are also developed to hold on the trees in a way it does not fall off. So like all the birds are adapted to the habitat they're living in. So over here we can say, okay, it has the head, the crown is red color, the wings have brown, and it has checkered or black and white throat towards the body. And this is a greater flameback woodpecker. And this is Malabar parakeet. It's also known as blue-winged parakeet because we can see the whole bluish hue. It's smaller than the normal parrots we see around here. And this is a white-cheeked barbet. See, just like the name. Once you get an idea about the barbets, it's like a lot of barbets, it's like, I think we get habits, it's through experience. We keep on seeing them, we'll be like, okay, this will be a barbet. And we keep on, okay, this barbet had this feature also. So when we check, there are like different type of barbets, like coppersmith barbet or different kind of barbet. So over here we can see it has this white cheek. So it is a white-cheeked barbet. And this is Indian golden oriole. Maybe you guys might have seen it. It's a yellow bird. It's quite big, and it's a yellow, completely yellow and black. And and it also like a similar bird is, there is black hooded oriole where the head is completely black. So it is known as black hooded. I think a lot of names is actually easier. I mean, there are some, unless you're not going for scientific names, I think a lot of names are associated with the morphological characters, and once you get the hang of it, it's actually interesting. Now this is purple sandbird, actually very magnified image. It's very, very, very tiny birds, and you see them. We see them having like drinking nectar, because you see it has a nectar beak over here, and this also like, okay, like I don't know. We know the male and the female generally in nature, in birds, are different. So over here in purple sandbird, it's black, and this purple metallic lustrous scales, lustrous feathers are seen only in male. In the female, it is more green and dull colored. And sometimes we wonder, like, why is the male more colorful? And actually, even sometimes I hear this, but in nature, the male are more beautiful. But actually, in nature, the male also have a larger risk, like when they sink or when they are more colorful, they also have a larger risk of predators attacking them. So actually, these birds have dull colors because they have to take care of their kids and they have to protect. So it's actually, yeah, most male birds are attractive, but there are also a lot of birds which are monogamous also. Monogamous means similar. Even warblers also, it's very hard to differentiate between them. And actually in birds, where the males and the females are similar, their parental duties are also similar, like both of them help in taking care of the kids. So it's like when males have a lot of, we say it as ornaments itself. So when males have bigger ornaments, so they invest a lot of energy, like maintaining these large feathers, especially in peacock, or they invest a lot of energy in maintaining these things, and they're also more prone to attack. So actually, it is, I think a nature way. And but it's also said that birds which have more ornaments or which are more colorful among their species, the females choose them, because it can indirectly show that they are more healthier, because they can feed themselves better, they can look after themselves better. So there are a lot of, I'm sorry if I'm like going on too much detail, but I'm saying even when you're looking for birds, maybe you might see the purple sunbird itself, and you might see its female, which is like green and dull colored. So maybe having an idea about the male and the female can help a lot. Then, okay, this is about the Kerala birds. I'll send an atlas in the group. So like common birds around here, all the birds which are found in Kerala is mapped, and the details, everything is given. So over here, I'm going to talk about some birding ethics, like what to do when we're actually going for birding. So first of all, like when you're preparing yourself, when you're going to a forest, things to remember is wear camouflage dresses, like the nature's color, green, gray, or dark colors. Don't wear bright colors, because even birds, we know, even when they're searching for mates or anything, they're attracted to these colors, like flowers, everything. So they're kind of distracting them. Or also they'll, when we see, they might see us as predators or, someone who's gonna attack them. So it is best you wear like colors of the forest, like green, olive green, and wear a hat, and walk slowly. I mean, even I get scolded by my seniors when I walk like really fast, when I make noise when I walk. So you have to learn, it's a whole art where you learn to walk slowly, not make that much, and don't talk like conversations, everything after the birding. Like just concentrate on hearing the bird, seeing the bird. Like when you talk, you keep on, we get involved in the conversation, we forget to see the nature. Sometimes it's not only the birds, like when you're in a forest, you might see a lot of stuff like beautiful butterflies, or maybe even herpetology, frogs, or sometimes mammals. But that's one thing which you know is, prefers, don't wear perfume also, because it can affect the forest. The best perfume, especially like elephant and all, they can sense you from like 50 meters away. They are sense. So as basic as possible, wear like forest colors. Don't use
Mama, can please explain for me something to
don't make noise.
Okay.
And also remember to limit your groups. Like even when we go for bird surveys and all, it's like 4 to 5 members in one group. So it's like when footfall and all this noise, everything you do in nature is minimized. So keep your group small, like 1 or 2 persons. And I think when you're going in normal areas now, it is fine. But when you're going to sanctuaries, or even if you're going towards inside, I think you'll have rangers and all accompany you, or people who are like professionals, so who knows, like if a wild animal comes, it will be there. I think one of the person asked in the group, like, what are the laws? I think as far as I understood, it is going to these forest areas. All the protected areas are protected in India. Like they will have specific boundaries, and you need permission to enter. Even sanctuaries also, like they'll give you more easier permission. You just have to go there and talk to them and all. And in sanctuaries, there are a lot of rules, like you should not make noise, and respect the nature, and don't leave anything behind. I think it's all over. Wherever you're going in a natural environment, don't pollute it. Like whatever you do, because birds and all animals, like plastics or even microplastics, they feed and they die. Like a lot of pictures we continuously see of them, talking on plastic or eating bubble gums and not being able to function properly. So nature, whatever you go in nature anywhere, make sure you don't pollute it, or make sure you don't dirty the place. And then just stay on roads and trails. It's like even if you're going through sanctuaries also, there'll be specific trails for you, like what is commonly gone. So over there, when you go, I think it will be more safer. Unless if you're like research oriented, then you take rangers or forest officials, and then you go into the deep forest and all that. But I think for with kids and all, obviously stay on the roads or the trails, or at the safari journeys also. Like just there'll be like obviously the forest officials will be staying on the trails. And over here, I said do not feed wildlife. Do not feed wildlife is something I really want to talk about in detail. This, when I say do not feed wildlife, it also includes pigeons and even peacocks or all the birds you see outside. It's because you want to know the meaning of camouflage. Camouflage dress. Camouflage is basically the dress like nature itself. Like camouflage is what I can say, it's like hiding into it. Suppose you see like maybe dressing like a tree itself, or tree, or like how the forest looks, olive green, brown, and wearing like checkered pants, printed pants which have the forest prints. So when you wear that, the birds or anyone is not distracted also, and you don't see him as a threat. Yeah, army dress kind of. Okay, now I'll talk about do not feeding wildlife. As it's a very common practice to even feed the pigeons, or feed monkeys, or feed any kind of wildlife. It's really, really bad. Even suppose when you see a wildlife, some civet or anything, when you see they are in danger, or when you see it's danger, it is better you call forest officials, like forest officials or NGOs. They know like what kind of food they need, or The problem is, I'll start with pigeons itself. When we are feeding pigeons, because I have seen them a lot in Delhi and I've been trying to like prevent it also. So when we feed pigeons or any animal, we keep on making them used to a specific kind of food. Suppose like pigeons in nature won't be eating that specific kind of cereal or the grain you give. So it's like when you show them, so it's like, yeah, when you feed, it's you overfeed them, and also they have a nature's balance about how how they'll find the food or how much they should breed, and all this is affected. Uh, and a disease, so like maybe just like Googling it, just to understand, there's a lot of diseases and all which keeps on getting, we also get diseases from them, like pigeons also, like humans are also affected. And even they get obese, and it affects the wildlife a lot. So it's best you don't affect them. Just don't feed them. Now this is Merlin app. This is a phone app which can be used by anyone. So in this Merlin app, it's just like I just put a series of screenshots. So this is the starting how it sees. So you add bird ID. You just click start bird ID. Sorry, click start bird ID, and then they'll ask where do you see the bird. So you search by city, and you give your city. Then ask when did you see the date, because migration and variation and all is there. So you give the city. Then you give what size the bird is and what color. So even kids can do it. Just add the location where do you see the bird, which almost this is like crow size, pin size, sparrow size. So just give an idea. And then they'll ask what were the main colors. So when you give these main colors, and they'll also see where did you see, what did you see them doing. So at that time you see to see them swimming or anything. So over here at these, this is a very simple, just open Merlin app, start bird ID. So it's very kid friendly also, and the Merlin app gives possible suggestions. Okay, so this can be this bird. So generally from the suggestions you can easily understand which bird it is. This is gadgets which you can use. I have just kept the images. If you want, I'll send the links also, the links of these gadgets later in the group. And I've just added, I've actually asked around. I also use a very simple binoculars and a very basic camera. So I don't think I'm professionally able to do this. So it's like, I'll directly send you the link later. Basically, Olympus and Bunshell is a good company for binoculars. Even I use Bunshell. It's a really good clarity ones, and it depends on the price range which you want. But remember, even the binoculars I use is very heavy. I think it's just Bunshell, this one itself. So sometimes it's very hard. But I get lazy to take my binoculars because I don't want to hold it. So make sure it's also lightweighted. I'll send the whole PPT. I'll also send the links also if you guys want. I just put a basic camera, like this is the camera I use, but also depends on photographic skills you want. For greater, people can use like Nikon or different lenses. There's a whole array in gadgets. Okay, this is just few important sites, which is really makes it birding much more easier for kids. So Cornell Lab, Bird Academy, even the Merlin app, eBird, whatever comes under this lab. So in this Bird Academy, over here we have course catalog. There's a lot of courses where you can learn a lot about birds. For everyone, it is there. Then there's videos, basic videos about bird songs, morphology, or how they fly, and a lot of details is given. This is what I said, learning games. Over here, you can, like when you click the learning games, there's a lot of games like bird anatomy or bird songs, or I think beat bird, something is also there where you mix bird songs and all that. It's very interesting over here. So this is like Bird Academy in the Cornell Lab, and anyone can learn a lot from these games. And this is underside, which is BirdCon India. I just showed this here because it's home. Then in birding, there is get started with birding. Over here also, there is all this material. I'm also sending some of the material directly as PDFs. And this is like how to identify bird digital tools, getting started learning bird songs. So this is like a brilliant site just for beginners, conducting the bird walk basics, everything, Indian birders, Indian birds you commonly see. I think from here onwards, Auxia ma'am will take. Thank you. I'll just skip this slide.
Thank you so much, Amal Fatima. Thank you so much. I'm sure
I'm
everybody
so sorry, I exceeded the time limit.
No problem. It was so interesting. I'm sure everybody was so engrossed in it. There's a saying that bird watching is an outdoor hobby that can be enjoyed indoors, and that's exactly what you have taught everyone. You know, now, I'm sure from tomorrow everybody will be listening carefully to all the bird songs and downloading the app, trying to figure out which birds. You really brought in some amazing insights into bird watching. Thank you so much. So just wanted to tell all the parents out here that CRINC is always trying to bring out such interesting webinars all the time to make parenting fun and a learning process. Now, in the beginning of the program, I had told you that I would be speaking a little bit about the CRINC's parenting methodology. Now, to understand this, I'll give you a small situation. As an adult, you might feel sad sometimes, or depressed, or frustrated, or confused. What do you do then? You might, you can probably write your thoughts in a journal, or sit in a corner and think about what you're feeling, or share it with a friend. But as an adult, you can do all this. But think about a child. When a child is crying uncontrollably, or they are trying to disobey some routines that you have set for them, or maybe they are addicted to screen time. These are situations that make you lose your cool. You become frustrated, you become angry, and you vent out your emotions on the child. You feel bad, they feel bad. And at the end of the day, you feel, what a terrible parent I am. I'm a bad parent. You know, these are some situations that can happen in most of the households. So the fact is that there is no bad parent or good parent. There is only situations in parenting which where there are bad and good responses from our side. Now, these can happen because of certain conditionings like you're conditioned to believe that kids can't understand anything, or they don't understand the adult's emotions, or kids, they need to be spanked, or they need to be punished to bring in some discipline, or to teach manners or values. You need to punish them. Or we are also conditioned to not respect their emotions, just like how you want other adults to respect your emotions. We don't actually respect our children's emotions because we just dismiss them as mere tantrums. Now, in the CRINC parenting methodology, these are the conditionings that we address. We try and... Sorry, somebody's mic is on. Okay. So in the CRINC's parenting methodology, we address these conditionings. We change the attitude of parents to understand the child from the child's perspective. This way, you can build a very trusting and mutually respectful bond with your child. Most of the time, what parents don't understand is that the non-verbal communication from our side or from the children's side is something that has to be given utmost care and attention. So this is just a brief about the CRINC's parenting methodology. If you find it interesting, you want to find out more about this, you want to talk to us, you can always call us. Right now on the screen, you can see some of the master programs that we have, like Parenting Without Frustration is our successful master program that has reached to over 700 plus parents. This has got 6 other master programs like Fostering Independence, Building the Bond, Nurturing the Habits. We also have techniques which only CRINC parents understand, like glucose statements, 20-20-20 approach, the rabbits communication. These are techniques to build a very healthy bond with your child. If you want to know more about this, you can always contact us. The contact details are in the next slide. You can WhatsApp us. You can join some of our WhatsApp groups. This way, you will always be up to date with our free and paid webinars and sessions. We also are available on the social media platforms. You can always follow us. We'll also post these links in the chat window so that you can immediately join. Right now, we'll continue with the birding and the bird watching session. The next speaker is a very interesting person, just like our first speaker. Her name is Fauzia. Fauzia did her engineering from Mar Ignatius College, Mahatma Gandhi University, Kerala. And then she did her post-graduation from BITS Pilani. She is currently working in the field of banking software in Bangalore. As part of her work, she has traveled across the world, starting from Jamaica, Malta, and across Europe. She uses this opportunity to pursue her hobby. Yes, you guessed right, bird watching, traveling, etc. And in Jamaica, especially, she was able to witness the local life and had traveled locally to admire its natural beauty. She was also in Manila for some time in the islands of Philippines. Her hobbies include bird watching, traveling, like I mentioned, reading, writing, poetry. She loves to admire old architecture and she finds beauty in her surroundings. Wonderful bio. Over to you, Fauzia.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me. Yeah. Okay. So I think it's a lot of information that is being, given to you, for quite a long time. So I know I would like you to settle with it for some time. So my session won't be so elaborate. So I just want to start with one quote, and it is by the famous Nobel laureate Richard P. Feynman. So what he says, he's a master in many fields, physics and natural science and many fields. So what he says is, you can know the name of a bird in all languages of the world, but when you are finished, you will know absolutely nothing whatever about the bird. So let's look at the bird and see what it is doing. That is what counts. I learned very early the difference between knowing the name of something and knowing something. Yeah. So this is by Nobel laureate Richard Feynman. So I absolutely subscribe to what he says. So for me, bird watching is everything what Amal covered. That is the technicalities of bird watching. But bird watching is also something that comes very naturally to me, and something I look at it very organically. So I'm not if I see a bird and there are different type of warblers, different type, each bird, when you start identifying the bird, you may find it difficult to distinguish certain birds. Okay, but I'm not so hell-bent about it. I try to give my best to understand which warbler it is or which sunbird, but I'm not very particular about it. Instead, I spend time to look at the bird. I look at the beauty of the bird, and because wildlife, nature, it just excites me, and that is my passion. So today, the main thing what I am told to cover is bookkeeping in bird watching. So bookkeeping as such involves journaling what you have seen. So for me, the primary thing what I do when I go to field is taking field notes in books. So what you see on the screen here is a website called eBird. So this website helps you to record the sightings that you have done when you're going to a particular place to do a bird watching. You can record the location from where you did the bird watching, and you can mention what are the type of birds, what are the different birds you saw in that site. So that is what that you see in the screen. But before this, what I generally do is I do the notes in book. So how do I do that? So this is how I do it. What is on the screen. So it's my own ways where I draw some pictures, and so it starts with the name of the site. So on the left side, what you see is 25 March 2021, so from 10:45 a.m. to, I forgot to write the end time here. So I have gone to Sitaramapalaya Lake. That is a lake very near to my house where I stay in Bangalore. So the first bird I saw is jungle crow. So on the right side of jungle crow, I have written 2. That is a tally, the number of jungle crows I have seen. So generally, generally when I see a bird first time itself, I'll write 1 and try to add it. So here maybe I have written after some time, after I've seen 2 crows, I've written 2. or you can even add it and write like that. So I think I've drawn some picture of the lake, or the there is an island at the center of the lake. That is how in Bangalore they do lake development, so that nesting birds can use that island to nest. And then I have seen common moorhen, purple moorhen. So these are the common coot. So some 10-15 type of birds I have seen. And right, bottom right, you see that I have written some name of some butterflies, common lime, common momon and stuff. So this is my first, first point of recording, that is field book. And similarly on the right side, this is, I think, list I did in Kerala somewhere. So that is where we have Lawton sunbird, purple sunbird, oriole. So somewhere in Kerala, barn swallow, tern. So these are all different type of birds. Some of it Amal had shown to you. So once we do this, so this is how when you're on the field, you can get the kids hooked to what they're doing. You can ask them to write. I still remember when I went with Rustam's children, one of them, I think Isa or Musa, they started writing, because once I say the name, they don't want to miss it. They make effort to understand clearly what the name is, and they try to write it. They were trying to record it by themselves. So this is a takeaway for the kids from the field also. So when you as parents take them out, try to encourage this. So this is like that will also it will also help them to have a memory of that trip that they had with you, especially in the pandemic times. Now there are few and far trips in between, so it is a souvenir type of a thing. So once you do this, let us go back to eBird. So once you come back home, you can record it in that website called eBird, wherein Amal, can we go back to the eBird slide? Yeah, so you start with the location. You can choose the location from a map, or there are different ways to choose it from, and find the map as you see here. You see. So let us go to the next slide. Okay. So the date has to be recorded, and the observation type, whether you're traveling or if you're sitting in a hide, that is stationary, or this is a historical observation which you did so many years back. Some of our old time bird watchers, they are trying to record their previous the things which they did so many years back. The bird watching from their bird watching notes, they're trying to convert it to eBird. Start, time, duration, distance, party size. So these are all the different parameters that you record. Let us go ahead. And this is where we choose the name of the birds that we have seen. For example, lesser whistling duck, you had seen in the slides that Amal has produced earlier. So lesser whistling duck, if you have seen, how many you saw, that is what you have to write in that the box. So this is how you record each species of bird. And how will you know what are the birds? Don't get so overwhelmed. It can be built only by experience and with time. I still remember the first bird I saw when I started bird watching was a barbet in Masanagudi, and at the time it just looked like something very unique to me. Then I understood there are different type of barbets. Then the second bird I saw was a shama. And then in Bangalore, when I did the urban birding, the first bird I saw was an Ashiprinia. So it was sort of, I still remember, I used to call that bird a rowdy bird, because it used to, it behaved like a, rowdy, it tried to attack, tried to chase some other bird, or, it was looking like a rowdy to me. So I think these are all the things you have to tell your kids also, try to relate it to something, and, so that is how you'll know the name of the birds, by looking at the bird books. So we can share name of some of the bird books later in the group. So once you record the name of the bird, and there is on the right side, what you see is, are you submitting a complete checklist? So you can say yes or no, because sometimes you may not have identified a bird, or you would remember that there are other birds which you don't know, which you don't remember, or which you have not identified. In that case, you say no, and then you submit. And so in eBird, as you have an ID, you will know later, you'll be able to retrieve all your sightings, and that gives you immense pleasure to see different countries you have seen. You can even see in a map where you have seen, and you also have an option to suggest some sites as hotspots. For example, if you see a lot of activity, you can mark it as a hotspot. So this is basically the about the journaling. One is writing in the book, and second is putting it in eBird. So both of these things I'll recommend for the kids. For small kids only, maybe first you can initially few sessions you can focus just on writing in the book, and slowly then parents can show them eBird. And you can contact us anytime with your doubts. We have this group, and that is where we can discuss. So a few other things, random things that I want to say is, feather collection. Amal was mentioning about feathers, and how excited kids are when they see feathers. So that is one way to get them hooked. So if they're going for a birding, if they're going for a trek somewhere, if they see a feather, let them bring it back, let them keep it in the souvenir. We can ask some of our expert birders to help us identify the feather. That's what we can do. And then ask them to make sketches like what I have scribbled, the tree and all that. So there are people who teaches nature journaling. There's a lady called Sangeeta Kadur. So you just have to see her illustrations. It is so beautiful. So those they have online sessions and stuff, and we can share the details of that, and kids who are interested in painting and drawing can do that. And then create local groups in your apartment community or in your local area, other friends from your kids' school. So create that groups. So let these groups be a way for them to bond with nature, bond among themselves, go to forest. Some of my beautiful memories are easily, if I take 10 most beautiful memories in my life, 7 out of 10 would be connected to nature and forest, and so let that be the driving force. Let that be the driver for your kids also, because at the end of the day, it's more than the source of livelihood, or more than the academics. The things that you do out of passion is what that matters to you. When you have crossed some years in life, that's what you realize. So and I as Swapna was saying, I studied in Marathanesius College, Kodamangalam, and that is next to Tattekad Bird Sanctuary. But I still regret that when I studied in the college, I have never been to Tattekad even once, because birdwatching was not my hobby at that point of time. So let your kids won't have such a regret. Expose them to nature. Not all the kids will get addicted to nature, but from your side, you expose them. And as they say with solids, when kids try solids, they have to taste it so many times to like it. So for nature also, you have to be patient. You have to be with them. You have to handhold them, and just let there be no outcome at the end, but just take them outdoors, and and let them be. And slowly, I feel I am such a nature person that I can't imagine anybody not getting tuned to nature. So most of the cases, they will like it, they will want to do it. So yeah, you should just give that chance to them. Yeah. And then start small. Don't be overwhelmed. Just start small. Even standing outside your house and looking in the sky and watching birds and making a recording in eBird is a good start, or writing in your journal is a good start. Yeah. And other thing is, see, there are people who have joined from different locations. People in Kerala, they're obviously blessed with a lot of greenery around and maybe a garden or a backyard, most of them. But when you are in the Gulf or when you are in UK or US, you don't have a big garden. In US, obviously, it is different. You have good garden spaces. But in UK and Gulf, you stay in apartments. But wherever you stay, if there is a small balcony, keep a plant there. Keep a plant which is like a bush, and don't maintain it so much. Allow it to grow wild. I'm sure birds will come there. Some purple sunbird or some sunbird or some tit or something will come. And that is a good chance for your kids to have a look at the birds. Yeah. And the other thing is, keep bird baths in summer. Keep bird baths, and let your kid fill water in the bird bath. So these are some of the things that will help your kids to get used to bird watching, and start liking nature, birds. Yeah. So that is mostly it, and I will like to end what I have to say with a quote from Envy. It is in Malayalam, so people who don't understand Malayalam, kindly excuse me, but this is very dear to me, so I just want to read this before I end what I have to say. So Envy in his and this is the foreword in Keralathile Pakshikal, the famous birding book by Sri Neelkandan, and so it is like this: Arivathara kadal kaakaye adinte neenda chiragin valavine aa pakshi nurakanakkamarum tiragale ava poi tazhugunna chira sundara neela pralaya swapnangale. So yeah, so this is very close to me and it makes me emotional. But yeah. So Swapna, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Fauzia. It was really, I mean, somebody in the chat box said that look at the passion of the speakers. It's so infectious, and that's absolutely right. I mean, both of you just opened up a new dimension in birdwatching in all the viewers' minds. And I wish I could translate what you just said, but then some things, these poetry, just like shairis, you can't translate it into English. So it's a loss for the listeners. Anyways, this is the end of the session, and we're going to take question and answers. Before that, I just want to let all the listeners to know that we have 2 more wonderful workshops and webinars coming up this month. One is on the 18th of July. It is about, it's all about feeding from, you can see it on the screen, all about feeding from newborns to tweens. And then we have a 2-day workshop for parents, how to raise financially responsible kids. Please don't miss it. Share as much as possible. As much as you loved watching this webinar, I can assure you personally that it's going to be even more fun, all our sessions from CRINC, because it's all about making parenting fun, making parenting without frustration, and it's all about learning together with your child. So come check us out. We are a lot of friendly parents in the community, and let's work on building a generation that is independent and self-learning and full of curiosity. So I think some of the questions have come in the chat box. We can start answering it, Amal and Fauzia.
Yeah, can someone read the questions?
Yeah, if anybody, any of the listeners wants to read out the question, now is the time for you to unmute and you can read it out too.
Yeah.
Okay, the first question was that, is there any app to get colloquial names of the birds?
I think eBird itself, has common names and scientific names. And Merlin app that Amal showed, it helps to identify the birds, and it will give you the colloquial name of the bird. In English language, of course, not in our local language, but there are books in different languages. In Malayalam also there are various books like Keralathile Pakshigal.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is how to develop bird name expertise.
Yeah, as I told, that comes only with the experience. It's like how you remember the name of your friends, or how you remember different type of animals. So birds are also like that. It comes, and then you start to categorize them in your mind. You will when you look at the size of the bird, or when you see the flight pattern of the bird, you will say, okay, it's a hummingbird. Then you will start thinking, which hummingbird is it? Yeah. And then the next would be the size of the bird. So all this helps you to understand the what category. And then of course you ask the experts. If you are not able to understand, you look at the books. You have there is a book, I think, Kasmerisak. We have mainly two bird books. One is Grimet and other is Kasmerisak. So in that, the index front page itself, there are pictures of birds. So you can go by the picture. So there'll be small thumbnails, small pictures. So you will know that the bird I saw is like this. So from that thumbnail, you go to a page and you see so many birds which look like that, and the name will be written under it. So that is how you identify books from birds from books. Yeah.
Okay, and then there is a question, what are the benefits of recording in eBird?
Recording in eBird, of course, it gives historical, the history of your observation. So for me, when I look at eBird now, last time when I looked at it, it showed me, okay, some an observation I had made when I've been to Thailand. So it's like, and something else when I've been to Coorg. So that gives me it takes me back to that trip, the Coorg trip, that's first solo trip that I did. So I was like, it was adventurous. So it takes me back to those memories. And then it also maintains the number of species you have seen. For example, it consolidates the number of species. For example, if I've gone to a lake and seen 5 species, and if I've gone to another lake or another spot and I have seen another 15 species, different species, or there is an intersection, so it will show 10 species altogether you have seen. So there are some birders who want to see more number of birds. 1,000 is a big number among birding community. I have crossed 1,000 is like and there is a term called lifer bird. If you see a bird for the first time, you come back and tell your friends, I had 3 lifers in that trip. So yeah, so these are a few of the, and then like it's like any documentation, any journaling, it helps you have a sense of achievement of what you have done.
Okay, and then
I
there
would
is where to
like to
find
add
the
a
bird
point
bath in
on that.
Bangalore.
Amal, can you go ahead?
Yeah, I wanted to add a point on the e-birding. So actually, e-birding is a platform which is available for everyone. I mean, the starting when you make a checklist available, so it's actually like a citizen's knowledge book, or so like once you are going to Wayanad, so you just like go through the birds in Wayanad, so okay, these birds are visible here, and once you upload photographs or once you upload audios of it, so it's a knowledge which everyone can gain. So at a point, it's like a sharing, sharing your knowledge, and in that way, citizen scientists, there's a term for it also. So
It's
we are
called
doing
citizen science. Yeah.
we are doing a benefit to everyone else also once you do these checklists and give in audios and the photos and all that.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is where to find a bird bath in Bangalore?
So bird bath for me, I don't buy bird bath as such. I reuse my old vessels as bird bath. Like, we have chatti. It's a mud vessel with which you cook. So my old chattis are my bird baths. So other than that, if you want to buy something new, there are websites. Recently, I saw in one website a beautiful bird bath. I wanted to buy it. I can send the link for some websites where you can buy bird baths, or at any potters. It's better to go with mud, so that it keeps the water cool. And then you have to change the water. You can ask your kid to change the water if it is at the height that they can access. Change the water every day, wash it, change the water every day, and that also helps them to get hooked to what they're doing. Yeah.
Which are the bird hotspots in Kerala?
Yeah, I think Tattekad is one of the go-to places that people go, and then there are many beaches. And even I have done bird watching in the zoo in Trivandrum. Yeah, so my mother was in the hospital for some time there, and I went to the zoo, and I spoke to the administrator of the zoo, and I took permission to go to the zoo very early before the zoo opens. So I went there by like 6 o'clock, and because I had the permission, I was admitted in, and I saw a set of forest wagtails there. They're very surprised. These are wild birds, not the zoo birds, but they had flew in from somewhere, and I saw forest wagtails, 5 forest wagtails in the zoo. So I think for the newbies in the group, I would say just go local. Don't go behind these trophies, and don't try to see a rare bird. First, try with your local bird. Try with your myna. That will be, or the kaka. Yeah.
And do you know of any group that does bird watching in and around Mysore and Bangalore?
Bangalore, there are a lot of groups actually that there is a Telegram group. I was part of it at some time, but whoever is interested can ping me. I can find the details and send it. And then there is a Yahoo group called BNG Birds in Bangalore. Mysore also, there should be something. We should be able to find it. Yeah, I can check on that if you ping me on WhatsApp.
Okay, then there's a request to spell the name of the books you mentioned.
I think it's better we send it in the group. It's a little difficult for me to remember it off my mind, but in the WhatsApp group we can send the names of the books.
And there's one last question to share your insight on your experience seeing migratory birds.
Migratory birds. So I think there was something called a migrant watch run by, I forgot which organization. So in Bangalore, basically migratory birds, how I remember that so birds generally migrate during the winter season, meaning a lot of birds from I'm telling it in very simple terms so that the audience don't get overwhelmed with so much information. So around November, December, you start seeing winter migrants coming in. So there is a bird called wagtail, pied wagtail. So the moment I see that bird around end of November, I understand that the wintering has started and the birding season has started. So that is my memory. That is how I relate to migratory birds. And also, of course, bird watchers, expert bird watchers, they plan a lot of trip around December, January, that time, wherein birds from all over the winter countries fly across. And one personal experience I have with bird watching is we have a place called Nandi Hills in Bangalore where we all used to go for bird watching, and I have seen a bird called blue rock thrush there. Yeah. And last I think 2 years back, I was standing in the terrace of my house in Bangalore here, and there was a bird in the terrace, and I couldn't believe my eyes. That was a blue rock thrush. So it was probably doing a local migration. It was going from one place to another, and it just come to my terrace to rest for a few minutes. So yeah, that is called a local migration, probably. Yeah. Amal, do you want to add anything there?
No, but I would like to answer the next question, like the conservation threats.
Yeah.
Can I go on to that?
Please go ahead, Amal. Read the question, and then or somebody else read the question. And
It's like there was this question like, what are the major conservation threats for birds? So basically, I mean, there are lots of threats that general for all species. In birds, I don't. Okay, when you break up natural habitats, I mean, we say it like habitat fragmentations, or just destroy their habits. And I think in Kerala examples, we don't have native trees are there, a lot of them are there, God bless. But then still a lot of native species, native trees are cut down, or native areas are cut down, they are made into plantations, like banana trees and all that. So these birds, they can't build nest, or they don't bruise there, or they don't breed there, or they don't eat from these trees. So because of that, when a major, it's converting into agriculture, it's affecting the bird population a lot. And yes, climate change is affecting all birds also. Climate uh, climate change affects birds which are more on, I mean, there are some birds which can live in a lot of conditions, like crows, you can see them in a lot of different environment conditions. But there are some specific birds which are only found like in the Himalayas. So when there are temperature fluctuations, these birds can no longer regulate their temperature, adapt to those conditions, and they have to keep on shifting their habitat. And the other one is like pesticides. I mean, we know, I mean, I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but then we had almost like 40 million vultures in 90s and all. And now we have like, it's barely in thousands. That is because of the veterinary drug, Dinoflag. And these vultures, when the cows who have this drug, they die, and the vultures feed on them, it affects them and they directly die. Even pesticides, it continuously goes up the food chain, and it affects them, and their eggshells get thin and thin. There are a lot of factors. And yeah, about the bird feeders, actually, I'm also still I mean, a lot of people in my bird area, I mean, who are also like better birders and me and all, said like bird feeders are not needed. I mean, they will find food on their own, and we should never make them dependent on us. Like once we make them dependent on us, they're gonna keep on, they forget. Actually, there's a lot of research where they kind of forget their ability to find food on their own, and we don't know what the birds know. I mean, maybe we're like good researchers and all, but we just assume, okay, this bird eats this grain, and then we just feed them. Or like the monkey eats a banana, so we just continuously feed them bananas. But just like us, how we try to keep a balanced diet, humans, even the birds also need a balanced diet. Like they keep on if there are protein rich birds, like if their birds are extreme flyers, they keep on eating insects. So they know how to, like, by nature they know how to feed, they know how to find food. They have been surviving for millions of years, they have evolved more than us, and they know how to feed themselves. So I am personally very against keeping bird feeders at home, unless you are like like domesticating them. Then obviously, like, it's your responsibility to take care of them. And even when you domesticate them, like, make sure you give a balanced meal and like take care of them really well. I'm against actually feeding all wildlife, because obesity, diseases, and once you even interact with wildlife and once you don't take care of it much, diseases which are found in them can also, like the case of Nipah itself, it was found in a bat, but then it transmitted to humans. So you have to keep all this our distance also, unless you are like a professional, or if you don't like also wash your hands properly or wear surgical gloves. So it's best to keep your distance from wildlife, observe them from a distance, and they know how to survive. They will live in this world. They're also like highly efficient and intelligent creatures. So I believe, and I think someone asked how to save birds. I don't know. I think the basic thing is like this itself, like spreading awareness of their threats. So not instilling. I mean, it's not about only birds. Also, I think overall, like not instilling fear, especially something you can do to your younger generation. Like snakes are scary, oh my god, or lizard, oh my god, disgusting. No, don't do that. They all are like really wonderful creatures, and most of the snakes are not even poisonous. So don't instill fear. Like even lizards are very useful in maintaining pests. Every creature is useful in your cycle. So make sure you show respect, and you like teach people, animal kids or people around you. There are also a lot of organizations you can work, a lot of NGOs like Wildlife Trust of India or Bombay National Heritage Society, even local NGOs, like bird survey, conservations, and all that. How do you see birds are selling and buying caged birds? Okay, I'm also at actually ethical conflict that because even I keep on having fights with my mom, and I mean domesticated birds, yes, I understand, but even we have some birds. I think make sure you don't what I mean, there will be protected species online. There will be a protected list, scheduled list, or you can just Google like if this bird is protected or not. And even if so, if it is protected species, like don't refrain. And even if you're buying birds, buy birds which are native species, like all those African parakeets and all. They're in the market. Please don't buy them because first of all they are not native. The climate, the food, everything is not what they grew into, what they are adapted to, because like evolution, and the bird they are is a result of thousands and millions of years of evolution. So they are adapted to that area, to that climate. So and once this pet trade, especially these parakeets and all, when they are hunted, the kids are taken first and then they're grown, and so the population decreases really rapidly. So it's best to avoid pets, but also pets also help us connect with animals. So actually I have an emotional dilemma with it, but make sure you take care of your pets really well, and make sure the native species, native species which are not protected, which are not in schedule, protected by wildlife law. And there are like a lot of species which are in schedule 1, schedule 2 and all. Make sure you don't like keep them because they are like vulnerable species. Yeah, that's what I would like to say. Any other questions?
I think that's all. No more questions in the chat box.
Yeah, I don't see any more questions either.
Okay. Okay, then I think we can request the audience to send any further questions in the WhatsApp group. We'll take it from there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, presenters. Thank you, Kring team. On behalf of the Kring team, I would like to thank all the listeners for staying so long and noting down important points and asking questions. Stay in our WhatsApp groups, and we'll bring in more such interesting webinars and workshops. And see you soon then. Thank you. Bye. Have a great evening, whatever is remaining of it. Bye.